So I've been making fairy tale content on this channel for a little over a year now, and it's been doing pretty well, and I've been also going back to doing the bi-weekly chapter reviews for 100 Years Quests manga, and those have also been doing a variety of different ways, but pretty well overall. But one video that is honestly one of my best performing videos on the overall channel was basically the first Fairy Tail Explained video I ever did, and that was the 3 Great Fairy Spells Explained. And I am not gonna lie, I was not expecting that video to do as well as it did. It is currently, right now, my 4th highest viewed video on the channel. And that was the first video I had for Fairy Tail that actually started doing pretty decent in terms of views. And that made me incredibly happy, and that helped motivate me to keep pushing more Fairy Tail Explained videos. Now, over the course of the last year, I kind of tampered down with the explained videos to add in more theory videos, discussion videos, stuff like that. I did remember a promise I made at the time of that video's release, and that was if the 3 Great Spells of Fairy Tail video did well, I would give Fairy Heart its very own explained video. And so a little over a year later, it's time I finally broke down and explained what Fairy Heart is. The greatest secret of all of Fairy Tail and its history. And spoilers, everything surrounding Fairy Heart, not just of what it is, but as a concept and how it was brought about, is one of my favorite things in Fairy Tail, and brings a lot of things together in a very satisfying way for me personally, and definitely for a lot of fans. Before we get into this topic, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel, and shows you want to see more. Also, if you want to see me talk about other manga, go and check out my weekly podcast Shonen Pulse on the Panel Focus YouTube channel, where me, Nox, and Yatogami talk about 9 different manga from 3 different magazines on a weekly basis. We talk about a lot of different manga. If we're reading anything and talking about anything that you're currently reading, go and check it out, join the discussion in the comments, see our thoughts, and maybe make a few friends along the way. Or if you want to skim what we're talking about, see if there's anything interesting that we're talking about in terms of which manga we are currently discussing, maybe you'll find a new series you'll be interested to start picking up and reading. Check it out. We are currently a little over 100 subscribers away from 1K subs, and it is really great that we're close to that subscriber mark. It is a lot of fun. It's a passion project with me and the guys, so I would really appreciate if you guys check that out. Links will be in the title card and in the description down below. And if you want to see me talk about American comic books, a passion project of mine is my second channel, GW Comics, where I talk multiple different American comic books, primarily Marvel and DC for their current runs of comics, for Ultimate Marvel, and especially Absolute DC now that it's really picking up, as well as other recommendations and stuff like that will be posted here and there. It's a side project. I would really appreciate if you guys checked it out. It's a lot of fun. Links will also be in the title card and the description down below. Now with that out of the way, let's jump right into the video. So, Fairy Heart, the greatest secret of the entirety of the Fairy Tail Guild. A secret that is passed down between Guildmaster to Guildmaster from the time of Precht, the second Guildmaster of Fairy Tail, up until the current Master, Makarov, and later Urza, and it eventually became common knowledge to basically everybody in the entire guild, but we'll get to that in a second. Fairy Heart also goes by another name, the Lumen Histoire, which could be translated as the Light's History, or History of Light, which makes a lot of sense considering that Fairy Heart, while someone like Makarov's child, Ivan, calls Fairy Heart the darkest secret of Fairy Tail, the first master, Mavis Vermilion, calls Fairy Heart the light of Fairy Tail. And that fits it a lot better. Henceforth, the name Lumen Histoire, other than Fairy Heart, is one of the 2 names that it goes by. Lumen Histoire is hidden underneath the Fairy Tail Guild Hall, behind a massive door that is locked off, and like I mentioned prior, the only people who were allowed in this room and to know the existence of Lumen Histoire would be previous Fairy Tail Guild Masters. And something that I told just now is that Makarov's son Ivan knew about the Lumen Histoire, at least of its existence, and based on the information that only Guildmasters know, Ivan seems to have gained that knowledge from the second Guildmaster Precht, who would later end up being Master Hades of Grimoire Hearts when he fell to discovering the darker side of magic. Now, the Lumen Histoire is a giant crystal-like lacrima that has encased within the first master of Fairy Tail, Mavis Vermillion's body. The Lumen Histoire is basically Fairy Tail's secret weapon, as during the Tartarus arc, Makarov was actually planning to use Fairy Heart in order to stop the Faces, though there was no telling what repercussions would happen afterwards, but Makarov ended up deciding not to use it, which, for the best, I guess. But with Fairy Heart being Fairy Tail's ultimate weapon, it is also a very coveted power, as in the age of 781, the Alvarez Empire ended up trying to mount an invasion of Ishgard to obtain Fairy Heart, but ended up pulling back, mainly because Emperor Spriggan, aka Zeref, ended up deciding to pull back on the invasion as he didn't give any real clearance, but multiple factors outside of Lumen Histoire were the Ethereal Cannons of the Magic Council and the Faces. But later on in the story of Fairy Tail, the final arc, the Alvarez arc, Zeref decides to mount an invasion of Ishgard with all of his forces in order to claim Fairy Heart for a giant plan so he could eventually defeat Acnologia, but explaining all that would be a video for a different time. But why does Zeref want Fairy Heart? Why is Fairy Heart also known as the ultimate weapon of Fairy Tail? Well, Fairy Heart also goes by the eternal magic Fairy Heart. The reason being is that Fairy Heart's power is essentially an infinite reservoir of magical power. So much so that Mavis essentially said that if the Magic Council used it to power Therion, they would be able to use it over 100 times and it wouldn't even put a dent in the power stored within the Lumen Histoire. It is literally the strongest magical item in the world, but the interesting thing about the Lumen Histoire, about Fairy Heart, is that it wasn't like this originally. The origins of Fairy Heart essentially goes back to the time after Fairy Tail's founding, after the Great Guild Wars, when Mavis ended up seeing the birth of a baby Makarov. And it was shortly after a meeting with Zeref that she learned that she had the same curse as Zeref, the curse of Anxarnum. I can't pronounce that thing's name. The god that cursed Zeref with the curse of contradiction and all that. Essentially, once Mavis saw baby Makarov and fully understood the meaning of life, primarily due to being in war for so long, her senses of morality to an extent in terms of life and death were kind of annulled. Once she fully regained that sense of love for life, Makarov's mother ended up dying in that instance, and so Mavis fled for over a year, wanting to die, but she couldn't, until eventually she met Zeref. And the two of them, after truly connecting and seeing that perhaps they could do something to get rid of their curses and finding people that they could be 100% certain that they wouldn't kill them just by loving them due to the curse, Zeref's curse overwhelms Mavis and she seemingly dies in his arms. And he eventually brings Mavis's body back to Fairy Tail, where Precht finds it and then even realizes that who we just saw deliver Mavis's body was Zeref. And Precht, being incredibly distraught over what has happened, eventually took Mavis and tried everything he could to revive her. Multiple types of lost and forbidden magic, which eventually had him spiral towards the darker depths of magic. Now, due to all the different types of magic that he has used to try and prolong Mavis's life and revive her after placing her in this giant lacrima, he eventually realized that due to the life force of Mavis that was within her, as the curse didn't fully kill her, Mavis was kind of in a state of life and death, kind of not alive but not dead. Schrodinger's Mavis, if you will. All these different matters of magic research used to try and revive Mavis, her lingering magic energy from within her body, with how the curse ended up affecting her, ended up culminating into the creation of this brand new type of magic, the eternal magic that would end up being called Fairy Heart, giving infinite amounts of magic power to be utilized, which led Precht to keep this secret and only tell this to Makarov when he became Guildmaster, and make this a secret between Guildmasters to keep this under wraps, for nobody should know about the existence of a potential infinite source of magic power to, like the example I used earlier, somebody could use multiple hundreds of thousands of Ethereum cannons, and it couldn't even scratch or diminish any of the power within the Luminous Noir. However, many years later, Mavis's consciousness would eventually be known and take essential action and interact with the current members of Fairy Tail through a thought projection, which would first be seen on Tenro Island after the first 7-year time skip, and then later on as the series progressed, like in Magic Games, a bit in Tartarus at the beginning, and then eventually in the Alvarez arc, as she was able to interact with the current members of the guild, and once the Alvarez War began, she was able to fully disclose the origins of Fairy Heart and how it was created in the first place. The last thing to know about Fairy Heart is that despite it being infinite magic power within the lacrima that is Fairy Heart, the truth of the matter is that through these constant combinations and mutations that created Fairy Heart, this infinite source of magic power, in and of itself, was revealed to truly be Mavis's very own magical power, which at the end of the Alvarez arc, when Mavis was in front of Zeref and he finally got a chance to extract it from Mavis, he eventually used that power to enter Fairy Heart Zeref mode, which made him transcend time and space, which shows just how insanely powerful the infinite source of magic power that he acquires from Fairy Heart, and the true scope of magnitude that this power can be used, depending on who uses it. So in short, Fairy Heart was created due to the circumstances of Mavis's curse and Project trying to cure her, but eventually, due to all these experiments, created infinite magic power, thus keeping it a closely guarded secret between Fairy Tail Guildmasters up until the current Alvarez arc. What makes Fairy Heart so special, outside of, let's say, Law for an instance, is that all the Great Fairy spells don't really have too much of a wide-spanning origin towards their creation. Law, we have a bit of an origin for how it eventually became Fairy Law, but with Fairy Heart, it has this wide-spanning history that connects to one of the central characters of the story and the main antagonist, and having such a heartfelt and tragic love story essentially be the core of how its creation was done, with the heartbreak of one of Mavis's closest friends, and the research of that driving him towards the dark side later on in life, and eventually being the responsibility to be kept secret by Makarov once became Guildmaster. And since he was the child of Yuri, who was one of the founding members of Fairy Tail and one of Mavis's closest friends, and the child of Yuri's wife, who was the first victim of Mavis's curse, is honestly kind of, to an extent, kind of tragic. But yeah, I do kind of like how this one type of spell / magic source has such a rich, deep history and a full story detailing its origins that make me appreciate its utilization in the story and the drip feeds of information and teases we've had of it since we got back from Tenro Island. But what did you guys think of this video? How do you feel about Fairy Heart as a concept and how it's been utilized in the story and the story behind it? What other types of magic would you guys like me to look into and explain for the future of Fairy Tail Explained videos? And what's your favorite magic thus far? Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. And if you haven't already, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. Now with all that said and done, hope you all have an awesome day.